Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Movement was made on two major South African infrastructure projects this week. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss the details. Terence, welcome to Second Take. The Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa announced the winning bidder for the supply of metro coaches over the next 10 years. Can you tell us more?
Yes, the winning, there were 7 companies vying for this very big contract to supply metro coaches. We know that Metro Rail's been has very aged fleet. Some of this fleet was introduced in the 1950s. Most of it's over 30 years old. So they're needing to recapitalise it. There's been a whole toing and froing within government and from the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, Prasa, about how they'd fund this, and there seems to have been coming to terms around the need for fiscal resources. It is commuter rail. It's about giving people access to the cities, lowering cost of commuter transport in major metropolitan areas. And so that framework was set in place over the last few years, and then we had the process leading up to requests for proposals, and then there were 7 serious bidders that put their hats into the ring, and we heard this week that for the first phase, which is for 3,600 metro coaches over a 10-year period, a consortium led by Alstom of France and Actom, which was also known as Alstom down the road in Boksburg. They are the consortium that will lead the equipment side of supplying these metro coaches. And then there's the second parallel process that's happening to secure a black economic empowerment partner. It's a different way of doing it. So instead of the bidder coming with their partner, we're now having a parallel bidding process for the 30% stake in the project company, and we should know by the end of January who's won that bid. And then the two partners, so 70% being the original equipment manufacturer, really led by Alstom, and the 30% BE partner will have to come to terms during a period between the end of January, say, and the middle of next year. And then we should get into a process of actually building these metro coaches, and the aim is to start integrating some of this new equipment into the Metro Rail fleet from 2015. But there's going to be a phased-in localization portion. So initially, probably some of these will be imported, but within 2 years of rolling out this 10-year project, the winning consortium is saying that they will have 69% local content levels, and there's obviously a number of manufacturing jobs and operational jobs and all sorts of things that are going to come along with this. I think the figure around 8,000 has been mentioned. So it's going to be interesting to see now. We've had a fairly well run, it seems. Everyone's I'm sure the losing bidders are not happy, but everyone seems to have felt that the process went fairly well up until this point. We're going with a new model of BEE integration. It's going to be interesting to see how that happens. And then post-financial close is going to be the most interesting phase, actually building up a new factory, which will be at one of the Transnet rail engineering sites, because we've had a fairly integrated approach to this. It's not going to necessarily, the idea is to have technology transfer using Transnet rail engineering as the conduit to try and revive a rail manufacturing industry in South Africa. So there's been a lot of thought that has gone into this. It's going to be interesting to see the vision has now moved into sort of a financial, legal, bidding, a paper phase, and we're now going to see that moving from paper to real equipment, and it's going to be fascinating to see whether it actually turns out as promised.
Transnet also made some announcements regarding the proposed dig-out ports at Durban. You tell us more.
Yeah, this dig-out port plan has been around for some time. As AXA was forced almost to move across to the new airport out near Belito, this land became available, and this is land that's right next to the city centre, really. It's surrounded by industrial areas, and it's really sort of prime commercial industrial real estate. But there was always a view from Transnet that they would like to get access to that land for a second container port, mostly a container port in Durban, and that would be really digging in a very deep water channel digging in basically to where the old runway was, a big new harbour with 16 berths for container facilities next to it. So it's been on the radar for some time, but this was contested initially. Should it remain as an airport? There were a number of discussions. Weren't there other options for this land? But eventually Transnet secured the land at a price of 1.85 billion rand, and they actually this week took full occupancy of that site from AXA. So they took over the old Durban airport site. So there was a function held there to show what it looks like. Actually, it's amazing to see how quickly a property deteriorates, when it's not being maintained and it isn't a living environment. And they have now moved into a phase of planning for a port at that facility. And it's going to be a fairly long process because this land is not promulgated as a port. So that process has to go ahead. There has to be a huge community engagement process because there are communities surrounding that area, and there have been activist groups in that area for some time, and some of them are saying they don't want this new harbour. Others are nervous about what impact it's going to have on their property. Will they have to be relocated? And there are those elements, but it is a brownfield site. Nonetheless, there's environmental concerns there. Apparently, at last count, 11 black mambas on site and a few thousand chameleons that will have to be relocated because there's now going to be water where there is currently land. So, and there's other animals on the site that we saw quite a few monkeys there yesterday. And there's the environmental aspect. Plus, we have to look at the soil and the conditions and whether it is feasible to actually dig out this deep water port, because they want it to be a deep water container facility. Ultimately, by 2037, having 16 berths, being able to handle 9.6 million TEUs of containers every year, it would be a really very big container facility, the biggest in Africa, should it go ahead. And they wanted to be able to really deal with these really supersized container vessels that are starting to come onto the seas. Durban can handle sort of modest-sized ones, or bigger than what they used to be able to do since the widening and deepening, but it can't handle the new generation of container ships, so they're saying they need that. Plus, we're hitting a phase where capacity and demand are going to start crossing from about 2019. Durban's harbour's capacity won't be sufficient for the amount of containers that are expected to be coming in by that stage. So it's all very interesting, but the most fascinating part of it is this is not really budgeted for. It's not part of the 300 billion rand Transnet capital plan for the next 7 years. They're going to have to find a model that is going to be appetizing to the private sector. So it's going to be probably the biggest PPP that we've ever seen in this country if it goes ahead as advertised. And there is a long way to go. There's a lot of engineering studies, detailed design work, and really the packaging is going to be very important to be able to put out a model that, imagine similar to a bidding process where you have a contest to take over this new port. It's going to be interesting to see how Transnet Port Terminals fits in, because it suggests there's going to be a competitive pressures coming in. The Transnet National Ports Authority will remain the port authority that is through the legislation, but it's going to be interesting to see a whole new private development. And given that they're at such early stage and they want to package this into a PPP, into a build, operate and transfer type scheme, there's a lot of work that has to go into this, because they're really wanting to start building by 2016, so that the first containers can start being moved by 2019 when that capacity crunch hits. And that isn't a long time given the model that's been chosen. If it was Transnet building it, then clearly, and they had it funded, etc., then clearly, all these things can be done. But where you still have to package it and pretty it up for a sort of private bid, there's still some way to go. But it's a big development. I think the private sector will be interested to see that at last South Africa, in the infrastructure space, everything's been dominated by Transnet, Eskom, Prasa. We've got an opportunity for something large outside of the renewable energy campaign, which is private sector. for the private sector to become major players within this infrastructure space.
Do you think we're finally starting to see big infrastructure projects moving into the implementation phase? And what could this mean for 2013?
Yeah, the gestation period for these projects is long, and we obviously want everything to be shovel ready and hitting the ground running, especially when at the beginning of the recessionary period would have been great if post the 2010 World Cup we had these projects all ready to go. But there have been a number of things that have had to be worked out. There were funding problems at Eskom. There was capacity and engineering problems at Eskom and Transnet. There was massive funding shortfall for Prasa. So actually the way the designing of the renewable energy thing, it was something that South Africa almost has led the world in. It's a whole new design. It's a new framework. So a lot of sort of revisualization has had to take place, and getting things back into shape. So it has taken a long time. It's frustrated the hell out of the construction industry, because you keep hearing 4 trillion rands worth of infrastructure on the horizon. But where are the tenders? Where is the contract flow? When are the orders being placed? So I think we are getting over that hump. I think the Presidential Infrastructure Commission has been important in sort of bringing people together, focusing the minds. And these new ones, this Prasa and especially the dig-out port, Presidential Commission, I think, are going to play a big role. So they're trying to have a whole-of-government approach, so where all policy considerations are taken into place. The need for infrastructure and closing that, but the need to create jobs, the need to use the infrastructure to stimulate a new manufacturing environment. So I think that we've gone through this hump post-2010 of revisualization of this infrastructure rollout, and really getting a bit real. I mean, we had lots of plans, and we had a nuclear one. I mean, none of these things were even funded or fundable. So we've had to come back to basics and say, what can we do? What is necessary for the utility to do to take the lead? Where can private sector come in? And I think we're still somewhere in that process. We're not over the hump, but I think we're coming over that hump, and hopefully this will start translating into real proper tender flow and real contracts being awarded and real shovels in the ground and boots on the ground, and that we start creating real jobs, and not only jobs on site but manufacturing jobs around these programs. Because I think South Africa really needs this boost going into 2013. 2012 has been a dismal year for the economy. It's been a dismal year for our image as a country, in terms of Mariaan and other events that have taken place around South Africa. So I think we really need something to reliven up the 2013, 2014, 2015. And we've also had the very toxic politics. So I think hopefully with this toxic politics maybe behind us after December, and then hopefully with a lot of the planning and visualization that's happening, 2013 will be a bit of a better environment for the construction industry. Not necessarily that all the tenders will come through and all the order books will grow massively, but that at least there'll be confidence that this is starting to become real.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.